Hey there, so this is the module on understanding how our childhoods shape us. So there is a lot to cover under that banner, and we're not going to get into everything. I want to get into a few things that will help us understand ourselves better and help us move forward in our sobriety journey. So we're going to be looking at messaging from childhood. We're going to look at authenticity and attachment. And we're also going to look at birth order, because all of these things are really insightful ways to begin to understand ourselves better and understand also why we behave the way we do, and perhaps why the way that we drink or have drunk the way that we have. So we all have belief systems, behaviours and patterns, and those all come mostly from our childhood experiences. And the reason that this is important is even though childhood may be a long time ago, all of those behaviours and messaging and patterns show up in our daily lives. Our childhood shape us. And some of the stuff that we have absorbed that was given to us is dysfunctional and unhelpful. So we want to shine a light on that so that we can begin to discard it and form systems and beliefs and all of that kind of stuff that help us function better in the world. So when we're children, we're just trying to find our place in the world. We're trying to understand who we are into relation to our environment. And what we're doing a lot of the time is giving meaning. We're creating meaning from all of the stuff that's happening around us. So on top of that, we have puberty and we have all sorts of external issues to deal with, and then we're thrust out into the world. And most of us were thrust out into the world not very well equipped to deal with it, and we just muddled through and did the best that we could. So this module is not about blaming our parents. It's really about understanding how we were shaped and why we are the way we are. So one of the things in families is we all have all families have sort of messaging and phrases that they use over and over that kind of shape the family culture, really, and belief systems. And again, as children, we just kind of absorb that. I remember, I grew up, and I think a lot of people had this, for example, around food. You always eat everything on your plate. My mother grew up with rationing from the Second World War, and meat was very expensive, and oh my goodness, you don't waste food. And that was stuff that was said over and over and over and over and over. Things like not making a fuss, don't make a fuss, don't bother other people. That was something that was said over and over and over and over in lots of different situations and circumstances. And all of that stuff gets absorbed, and again, we create our reality based on it. So a lot of the stuff that I took from don't make a fuss was kind of like, oh, your feelings don't matter. Like, not making a fuss was quite often in relation to I'd be upset or whatever, and that would be closed down. And one of the ways it was closed down is, oh, don't make a fuss because it bothers other people. So I took that and internalized that my feelings don't matter. Other people's feelings and experiences are more important than mine. So you can see how, and often some of these things were said quite innocently, can create, we take that, absorb it, and we create kind of meaning and beliefs from that are often far away from the initial intention, but we create meanings and beliefs that don't serve us. So what we want to do in this module is really unpick some of those messages and phrases and things that were told to us over and over and over in childhood that are still with us today. So if you, with this module, there is a handout which goes over a lot of this stuff, and there's a bunch of questions at the end. And what I want you to do is journal on that, and when we're in our meeting together, is we can begin to unpack and discuss some of that. So two of the ways that I see as a therapist our past show up in our present, our childhood experiences show up in our present, is in our relationship with food and in our romantic relationships. Those are really, really shaped by our early childhood experiences. And so, for example, my husband, PhD, professional, proper grown-up, when my husband makes dessert, it's dessert like a little boy. It is chocolate and it's fudge and it's marshmallows and it's goo, and And that comes from his childhood. It's comfort. It's the fact that he was unsupervised, so he could just put all of the things in there. It's a direct kind of insight into what his childhood experiences were like. And you might have the same, how we eat, how we relate to food, whether it's comfort, whether it's reward, whether, and again, both my husband and I, we both grew up with TV dinners in front of the TV. So trying to create that kind of environment where we sit down at the table with our children, that wasn't natural to us because we didn't grow up like that. So all of those, it's really interesting. If you watch other people, if you observe their relationship with food, that is a direct insight into their childhood. Hoarding food, if you had food scarcity, all of that kind of stuff. And also in romantic relationships, nothing is more painful and more difficult than romantic relationships. And there is another module on that where we go into that more deeply, but I just want to touch on it here because the pain of relationships, is romantic relationships in particular, is there is, it affects all of us. It's not just people with an alcohol problem. We've all experienced that deep emotional pain that comes from being in a romantic relationship or not being in one. And the patterns that we have in how we love and how we attach to people, all of that will have come from childhood as well. So I want to go into talking about authenticity and attachment. So if you check out the handout, there's a link to a video by Dr. Gabor Mate where he talks about trauma being the root of all addiction. And that is my perception too. That's been my experience, that when someone experiences trauma when they are young, that is really a ripe environment for, as an adult or as a young adult, to look for a numbing agent, an anesthetic, because of that that trauma that they're carrying. So that kind of makes sense to a lot of people. But I have a lot of clients who say to me, but I didn't, nothing like that really happened to me. I felt loved. I feel like I had a pretty good childhood. And what's really important to understand is when we are children, we have two vital needs. One is for attachment. And we understand that more or less as a culture, that infants in particular, but children, they need strong attachments to their primary caregivers. If children or infants are not attached to their primary caregivers, that is going to set up a lot of trauma and mental health issues, all kinds of issues down the road. So we kind of understand that attachment is important, and a lot of us received our appropriate attachment needs. Lots of us didn't. The other need that we have is for authenticity. Now, authenticity is who we really are. And what can sometimes happen in families and communities is we sacrifice our needs for authenticity in order to get our attachment needs met. So an example for this would be, probably quite a classic example, is if you were gay and you realised that at, maybe around puberty, and you were in a family or community that wasn't going to be accepted. So that was authentic to you, and then because you realised that wouldn't be accepted by your family or environment, it might be something that had to be pushed down and hidden in order to stay connected and attached to the people around you, because we need that for survival. This goes back, thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. We need our tribe. We need our people to survive, because we can't survive on our own. So we will do whatever we can to protect our attachments. And sometimes what we sacrifice is our authenticity, who we really are. For me, it was that I had these really big feelings in my family. And my family don't do big feelings. That's unacceptable to them, frightens them. So they shut that stuff down really, really fast. So I'd have these big feelings and be like, oh! Not acceptable, not allowed. Oh, what's Veronica doing? So my authentic self was pushed down. And what happens when we have to sacrifice our authentic selves is we begin to leave ourselves by degrees. And this experience is painful and can be traumatic. when we sacrifice and push down our authentic, real selves in our families, in our peer groups, in our communities, we leave ourselves, and that is a painful and traumatic experience. So that is sometimes where the trauma comes in. And this is why you hear me say a lot that sobriety is about returning to ourselves. And it's about returning to our authentic selves. That really is the journey of ourselves and being who we really are. Not living authentically is a source of great emotional pain. There's just simply, we have to be who we really are. There is no other way to live. And because that's painful, we're going to need an anesthetic and numbing agent. So a lot of the work that we're going to do together is about you returning to yourself. And please see the handout for the video and some more information on this and some questions around this. The Dr. Gabor Mate video is useful to watch. So I also want to talk a little bit about birth order, because it's also really fascinating in how it shapes us. Now, birth order is it's just a way of understanding how our personalities are formed. What order we were born in determines how we were parented. And this experience carries on all through childhood. Now, there's lots of, birth order is correct, but there's a lot of multiple variations of it, if we have half brothers, half sisters, step siblings, if we were the oldest boy, if the eldest girl, maybe we were the middle child, but we had an elder sibling with a health issue or disability, and that means instead of being a middle child, we would actually become like the elder child. So there's lots of variations. If it really sort of impacts how, first of all, we relate to our peer groups and friends, and then into our wider relationships and our romantic relationships. I was an only child, so I longed for siblings. So my friendships were quite intense, and I would often be quite invasive. They meant more to me than they did perhaps the person I was friend with. And I think I sometimes pushed people away, because when I was younger and I didn't understand this, I wanted them to be like a sibling, and of course they weren't. So there's lots of variables. It can depend on whether there was big gaps between children, the sex of the child, whether there was physical or mental or emotional issues with the child, if there was a sibling death, the relationships between parents, blended families, all that kind of stuff. But they are also an interesting way in understanding why we are the way we are. So firstborn, and what's really interesting about being the firstborn is twins will absolutely know who's the firstborn. So it doesn't matter, it's minutes or seconds. However, there is an eldest twin. And that's really interesting about the kind of how we, as a culture, there is this kind of hierarchy that we create. So older children are often experiments, because nobody knows what they're doing when they have their first child. And they can often be super responsible, perfectionists, well organised, natural leaders, hard driving. Firstborns often have a need to be in charge and to be noticed, all of that kind of stuff. They're used to having a lot of attention on them. They often achieve lots of things, top of their class, all of that kind of stuff. And that just carries, because the firstborn is the first to do stuff. Oh my gosh, they got an A. Oh my gosh, they scored a goal at soccer. And so firstborns are kind of very conditioned that going first brings all this kind of attention and all of that kind of stuff. And then, by the time the second or third or fourth or fifth child comes along, parents have kind of gone down that road, and the achievements and accomplishments are like, they've just kind of got used to it a bit more. So we will all have traits from our birth order that it's neither good or bad. It's about balance. It's about where we are in balance. So it shapes us. There's no getting away from it. It's just, are those things in or out of balance now? Only children. Really interesting. Only children, we don't understand sharing. Don't touch my stuff. My stuff is my stuff. They don't understand being teased. They usually make friends easily because they had to, can be big readers. Adult-only children have to balance two extremes. Thinking they are more important than others because the attention was always focused on them. There was no one else to deflect that. and feeling like they are treated unfairly when things don't go their way. Because again, when you're an only child, you don't have to negotiate what you watch on TV or what you eat. It's your way. So when you don't get what you want, it can feel like it's unfair. There's a lot often said about middle children and how they're kind of squeezed in the middle. They can never be as good as the older sibling who's always, doing all the things. So they sometimes opt out and don't try and miss opportunities. Middle children can often be the mediator, compromising, avoiding conflict, independent, very loyal to peers, can often be a maverick and have lots of friends. And adult middle children can sometimes be, they're very used to compromising, and so they neglect their own needs. And then you have the last born, the youngest. And last borns are very aware from a very young age that they are the youngest, smallest, weakest, and least equipped to compete in life, right? They are, if there's a race, they're the one at the back, and they can't do things as quickly and as well. So that the last child born can often be a rebel or make a mess, as that's the only way to get attention, because there's just so much else going on with all the other kids in the family. They can often be a charmer or a rebel, social and outgoing, and they need to prove that they matter. They can often have a big desire for attention. The last child can often be the kind of joker in the family, the entertainer, the one who makes people laugh. And they can often be the one that gets looked after a lot. They've got lots of people fussing over them or doing things for them. So they can often, as adults, feel powerless. So that's just a kind of general idea of, and again, like I said, there's variations. You might be the second child, but the oldest girl, which means, I have lots of clients who maybe had 3 brothers and they were the second born, but they were the only daughter. So they then had some middle child stuff, but they had a lot of firstborn stuff because, again, the way our culture is shaped, they were given, more responsibility, and they kind of have a lot of firstborn traits. So there's lots of variations, but I want to see where you are and what traits you feel that you have. There's also a podcast on this that I'll also put in the handout that will go into more detail about some of this stuff. So in the handout, there is a bunch of questions that I'd really like you to journal on and bring to our sessions. There's stuff around looking at our patterns with food, the messages and statements and phrases that were often used in our family. Did your family have a motto? Like, I would say probably my family motto was, what will other people think? Like, that was like, if we could have a motto, it would be that. Like, what other people think is the most important thing. What was your motto? I want to look at your attachment needs. Were they met as a child? And what parts of yourself did you have to hide and what push away because it wasn't going to be accepted by your community or your family? Did you feel accepted by your peers, or did you have to change who you are in order to fit in? Fitting in is such an important thing for children. If you've raised children, you've probably seen it. We need, and again, this is part of our ancient DNA. We need to fit in and be attached to the wider group. Otherwise, we won't survive, right? So we all of us are capable of, chameleon-like, changing and compromising ourselves in order to be accepted and to fit in. And that part of that is to do with our survival. It's not a bad thing. It's about it being out of balance. So a lot of this is looking at, where are these things out of balance? What's serving me? What am I, Johari's window, what have I learned about myself that was unknown to me and perhaps unknown to others? What is being revealed here that is helpful to me to know that I can now discard and leave behind or nurture a bit more or whatever? So that's the purpose of really understanding our childhoods. It's understanding about where we came from, why we are the way that we are, what shaped us. What situations and experiences did we go through that really created these belief systems that we're beginning to discard now? So I look forward to seeing you in our next session, and where we're going to dive more deeper into this.